we're going to be making some gingerbread cakes. This is a recipe from 1747, from a cookbook at that time. So basically flour, ginger, salt, sugar, molasses, a little bit of cream, and some butter. So they are definitely cakes that would be a special treat, and also one that would make the whole house smell good as they're baking. And these I will be baking in the bake kettle. So one of the things that the recipe calls for is nutmeg. So it calls for a quarter of a nutmeg to be grated. So I'm just going to grate it, and so of course it's not measured in teaspoons like we are used to. Just says till you use up a quarter of your nutmeg, which is a goodly amount. I think probably a teaspoon or so, maybe a little bit more. But between the molasses and the ginger and the nutmeg, it's definitely a lovely spiced cookie. The nice thing about the bake kettle is you can bake in it, and it needs less fire than the bake oven. So you could do baking, small baking, as it was called, a little bit more often during the week. So I'm going to mix the cream and the molasses together. You take the butter and you just cut it into pieces and incorporate it into the flour mixture. And the directions say make it into so it's pea size. You might have seen that before. If you're making something else with flour and butter, we need to make it into small pieces and incorporate it so that it's part of the dough. So you might have noticed, or maybe you didn't notice, what I was using to mix the dry ingredients together. This is a whisk. This is a whisk that they would have used back in the 18th century for sure. Just tiny little branches put together with some wire, and it works very well. We like our modern metal ones or maybe silicone ones, but these work very well as well. And the directions in the recipe say once you've got it, you have all the butter in, you incorporate it by rubbing it against the side of the bowl. So this is when you'd kind of get your hand in there and make it so that all the pieces are nice and small. Alright, I'm going to, as I said, mix the molasses and the cream together and add the wet ingredients to the dry. And the recipe says this will be a very stiff batter. Because as you can see, there's not a whole lot of liquid that goes with this. So now the recipe says to divide the dough in 4 parts to work at each individual part. So I will be doing that, putting this just a little bit onto the board here. cut the dough with a cup, whatever size you might have. And put it onto your baking dish. And continue with that until you've filled up the dish.
We're getting ready to do some baking out on the hearth using the bake kettle, which is this little thing over here. Sometimes referred to as a Dutch oven, not really sure why. But a bake kettle is used for like baking today. Think of it almost like a toaster oven of the 18th century. We're doing big baking in volume in the bake oven, but the bake kettle is good for making one thing. If you want to make like a pie or a cake, or in this case, some cookies to eat today. So the bake kettle's been preheating, and the way we preheat it is by leaning up sort of inside the firebox here, so that the iron can warm. Otherwise, if you put cold iron on top of coals, you're losing a lot of baking time just getting the iron to heat up. All right. So that's one of the tricky bits, is making sure that it's warm enough and not too hot. And we're also preheating the lid for the bake kettle. And you'll see that this lid has an edge, a raised edge all the way around. So the bake kettle has feet, so it can sit on top of a bed of coals on the hearth. And then once you've put the food inside that you're going to bake, then you put the lid on top and pour more coals on top. Because that's what baking is. It's cooking with dry heat underneath and on top, all the way around your food. So we've put sort of an insulating bed of ash on the hearth, and now I'm going to shovel coals onto it. And this is kind of hot work, because this bed of coals is really warm. I'm needing a little more shovel. And you can see why, if I'm planning on doing more baking or more cooking on the hearth later on, I'm going to have to pay attention to the fire and add more fuel. Again, planning ahead, that we want to make sure that we're going to have enough coals for later. So we have a little trivet to keep our baking dish off the floor of the bake oven, because otherwise it's too much heat. You need to have that air circulation. And now we have our pan of ginger cookies. And it gets pretty warm in there. This goes on top, and more coals. Enough, Nancy, do you think? Or do you want a little bit more?
A little bit more. Yep, that's good.
Now, if we were baking something that took a long time, like a pie or a cake, we want to turn the bake kettle partway through, and we might have to refresh the coals. But these are cookies. They're supposed to break pretty fast, so keep our fingers crossed and we'll see. And I'm going to add some more wood to that fire.
Oh, that looks good. I think they're done.
Right. I'll let you test.
No, not quite. Another 5 minutes. Okay. If they're soft. So another 5 minutes, and I think they'll be cooked through, because they're supposed to be soft ginger cookies.
So we turned it so Because sometimes the part that's near the fire is hotter. Let's see what happens. We think it's time for the cookies. So again, we're going to very carefully remove the lid. And oh, don't they look pretty?
Oh my goodness, they smell really good too.
Yeah, you can't smell, but we don't have smell-o-vision, but they smell delicious. So now we have to be very careful lifting the baking pan out that we don't burn ourselves. And there is a technique to it, like that. And there they are. Where's the spatula?
Oh yes, beautiful. We'll let them cool for just a little bit.
Alrighty.